Hello and welcome to this next episode of First Deal Diaries. Today I'm joined by Phil Saunders. He is unfortunately no relation, but we are looking forward to having a great chat about the service accommodation industry. Phil, welcome to First Deal Diaries.
Thank you, Danielle. Yeah, it's great to be here. Really pleasure to join you and offer much value as I can to the audience with the journey I've been on, particularly my first deal, which, as we'll find out, is really creative and very interesting and unique.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about yourself, your background and what you're doing these days, please.
Okay, yeah. So I worked on wind turbines for a long time. I was a rope access technician, which means I get paid to abseil off stuff. I've always been into rock climbing and climbing trees ever since I was a small boy. So getting into this kind of adventurous type job was perfect for me. We get a lot of people that join rope access from the military, that have ex-servicemen and just want something a bit more exciting than sitting behind an office all day, every day. It allowed me to travel, to go all over the world. I got very, very good at it. I became a specialist in fixing wind turbine blades. Wind turbines have grown and grown and grown, but 15, 20 years ago, there weren't as many as there are now. So my skills were very much needed to try and keep these wind turbines spinning and making money for the companies that were owning them. And now it's a real growth industry. They're everywhere. There's thousands of people like me running around the world fixing these wind turbine blades. It was a great career, something I really love to do. I love the travel element. I love the money element. I love being in different countries and getting paid to kind of explore these different areas. But for me, the major change was when I had my twins were born, my identical twin girls, Maya and Isla. They're 8 now, so 8 years ago. And originally going away and carrying on my work was great. I was like, I've got twin girls. I'm going away to work, but actually it was a bit of a break from the home life. It's very hard bringing up identical twin girls. My poor wife, bless her, was struggling whilst I was working away, but for me it was still a nice escape. However, that started to shift as they got older and older and older, and then my presence was much greater valued by them as they were younger. But when they were growing up, they started to really notice when I wasn't there. And this also aligned well with COVID, because COVID happened and I couldn't just travel away for a couple of weeks at a time. They were starting to say, because of the travel restrictions and because you had to isolate yourself at each end of the journey, you were going away for 9 weeks kind of trips rather than 2 week kind of trips. And I remember a key moment when I was off to Norway for a 6-week job, and my kids were 2.5 at the time. I said, I'll be back in 6 weeks, and they really struggled with that. There was tears down their eyes. Daddy, where are you going? Daddy, why are you going? When you're going to be back? 6 weeks to a 2.5, 3-year-old is an enormous amount of time, as now it wouldn't be quite as impactful. And I just said, well, this is my last trip. This is the last time I'm ever doing this. I just couldn't kiss them goodbye and have them in floods of tears ever again. And that's when I really transitioned into property full time at that point.
Excellent stuff. So what do you do now? You've built a £6 million property portfolio. You're working 2 or 3 hours a day, I believe, to keep that business ticking over. Life looks pretty good, right?
Yeah, there's always work to do in a business. So I'm not quite at the point where I'm sitting back and doing only 3 hours of work, because in any business, if you're not growing, then you're kind of dying. So you need to keep growth, keep pushing forwards. But yes, I own a £6 million portfolio, which we can delve into further down the line on the podcast. I built that up in a very short space of time, during COVID, and we'll delve into this in a bit more detail. There was a huge opportunity to buy holiday homes, particularly the ones that I've bought. It was a great opportunity for us. And we bought 12, 13 houses in 1 year. I've not seen growth like that since in our particular industry. And then it was just a case of managing those properties as we move forward. But we're still growing. We're still buying houses now. Even in this market, there's opportunity everywhere. And I'm still buying not 15 a year. I'll do 1 or 2 a year. And then I've also got a training business as well. I help teach and show people how to buy the houses I buy in the method that I buy them. And that takes up quite a lot of my time as well. I enjoy it. I really like it. If I wasn't doing that, I'd have a lot more free time. But it's a really rewarding part of my day now to help the mentees that we have to achieve the same results that we've got. But it does take quite a lot of my time to do.
Excellent. So your first deal is quite an interesting one. We're going to go into that now. What year is it?
Great question. Way back when my kids were 2, they're 8 now, so we're rolling back 6 years, 2022. Yeah, 2021, 2022. Like many people, and this is a really common problem I've heard a lot, and one of the problems I help people to fix, trying to get into property can be really difficult. For people with lower incomes or low amounts of money in the bank account, the very, very common way that people try and get into SA is through a strategy called rent to SA, where you use other people's houses, you rent them, and then you put them on Airbnb and try and make a little bit of an uplift in the value that you're getting from those properties. I'd heard about the strategy. I was really intrigued by it. It was something I really wanted to do. And I was in that position where I didn't have 50 grand in the bank. How am I going to get into property if I don't have this sort of money to leverage? But I did have £5,000 or £10,000 and I could maybe do this strategy. So I was running around Manchester city centre. I live in the Peak District, not far from Manchester. And I was trying to desperately find an owner or an agent that would work with me, knocking on doors, making phone calls. And I was just hitting brick wall after brick wall after brick wall. It's a really common problem. If you're in that position now, it's just a case of keep churning away and grinding through it and being consistent with the kind of effort you're putting in. And eventually you will get a result. But at that time, I wasn't breaking through any doors. I wasn't getting anywhere. So I started looking in the Peak District where I live. And rather than looking for kind of apartments in a city centre, it was more holiday homes. Can I rent a holiday home from an owner, manage it, or maybe put it on Airbnb myself, or any other house that was in this area. And again, I was hitting the same barriers. People weren't willing to give me their property because I didn't have any credibility. People didn't know who I was. I didn't have any business currently running, but I knew I could do well if someone just gave me a chance. And often trying to get a break in this industry is all about getting that first chance, that first person that's willing to work with you. And then you kind of build very quickly from there. But again, I failed. I really struggled to make any headway here. But then I started thinking a bit more differently, a bit more creatively. Because there were lots of people trying to do this, and there still are, if you can think outside the box a little bit more and be a little bit different, then there's a world of opportunity there for people that are able to think in that kind of way. Driving around, looking at these holiday homes and trying to talk to agents, it was in the summer, everything was full. All the campsites were full, all the holiday lets were full, all the B&Bs and the hotels, everything was absolutely full, rammed, and there's clearly more demand there, but there were not enough units to kind of facilitate that. But what I noticed was there was a big lack of glamping sites, which is massive nowadays, but you go back 6 or 8 years, in my part of the Peak District, there were no glamping sites at all. No one could rent anything of any interest there. It was all hotels and campsites. So I thought, well, there's got to be something here. I knew the demand was there. I just needed to find a location. Where can I put a glamping site? Again, I didn't have 50 grand to go and buy a plot of land, get planning permission. So I had to do the rent-to-rent strategy again. But the real switch in my mind was, okay, could I do a rent-to-rent strategy with somebody else's land rather than their house, rather than bricks and mortar? And the obvious place to do that was existing camping sites, because campsites already have infrastructure. They've already built on fairly flat land. They'll already have toilet blocks, shower blocks, and things that my guests could use, but they might not have explored this glamping route yet. And could I maybe go and approach some of these landowners and farmers and campsite owners and say, hey, look, I want to start a business. Could I just rent a very small piece of what you already have, give you kind of a guaranteed rent throughout the year? I had no idea if it would work or not, but I was confident if someone would say yes, then I'd be able to find a solution. And that's what I did. So I wanted to do it close to where I was. I Googled, campsites near me on Google, and 35 campsites came up within 10 miles. I was like, okay, let's just start here, start as close as I can to where I live. So I just sat down with a cup of coffee one morning in a coffee shop, and I called all 35 campsites from start to finish. And I got a yes pretty quickly, but I just carried on going until I got more yeses and had more choice. And in the end, I had 4 or 5 owners, campsite owners that were very positive and said, that's great, sounds really interesting, come down, have a look at the land, and let's talk about this. And in the end, I found a great site and a really beautiful campsite overlooking a lake, beautiful plot of land, lovely facilities. Farmer was very, very open to the idea, and I said, look, what sort of deal can we negotiate? And what we landed on, which is a brilliant deal for me, was I would just give him £25 per night that someone stayed in one of my units there. And that was it. So if no one was there and the business was a failure, it didn't cost me anything. But equally, if we were really busy and really popular, then he'd make a little bit more money. And that was fantastic deal for me. And we kind of signed on the dotted line. And I ended up growing that little business to 3 or 4 different units on that one campsite over a period of a couple of years. And it worked very, very well. Very, very creative, very, very different, very unique. And a strategy that really helped finally get my foot in the door with an SA business on a rent-to-rent strategy, but just in a very different, unique way.
It's a perfect example. They say property is a numbers game and a people's business. And I think what you've shown there is that the numbers was you kept going. You had to make a lot of phone calls and get a lot of no's before you got that yes.
Yeah.
But it was your resilience and your personality that kept you going to get to the point of getting a yes. I mean, what was it that was driving you? What do you think is in your personality that keeps people going forward?
That's a great question. I've got a real drive to succeed in whatever it is that I do. Really, it'd be very easy to give up on strategies like this and think, oh, what's not worked. I'm just going to go back to the wind farms. But for me, I had to find a way to replace my income to stop me going away again. And missing my kids growing up. That was the key difference for me. You all need to have a really strong reason why you want to do this. And if your reason why is just to make money, then it's usually not strong enough. There has to be a deeper meaning behind it. You make money for a reason. Why was I looking to make money? Well, that's so I could see my children grow up. And that was my ultimate reason why, to watch my young kids, my twins, grow up to be young women and young adults. They're 8 now, so I'm still going through that process. But I wanted to be here. I wanted to be here for them, to help bring them up and help have a presence. And working away on the wind farms, that just wasn't happening, not to the same extent that I'd like it to. So yes, we all go through challenges in property. We all go through difficulties. We're still going through difficulties now. There's always challenges in any business that you run. But the thing that keeps you getting up in the morning, keep driving forwards, is a really strong reason why. So right at the start of my journey, I had that. I had exactly what I was doing this for. And you need that. So you need to have a really strong driver to carry you through the problems. And that will keep churning through, keep making those calls, keep knocking on doors, and eventually you will get this opportunity. An opportunity will arrive, and then you get going. And what I will say is, once you've got your first deal, things get easier and easier and easier and easier. Your second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, 10th deal, it all gets so much easier, so much easier. But that first one is the real challenge. It's the real roadblock that most people give up on. They get to the first one and they can't do it, and then they just go off and do something else. And
It's
the
such a
people,
steep learning curve, isn't it? The first
yeah,
deal.
it's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot.
Do you still have those units?
I don't do the glamping sites anymore. I have considered it. I have considered it. It's a really good cash flow business, but ultimately I wanted to own assets, and the assets I owned, of course, were the yurts. In the end, I decided to put yurts on the land for various reasons, because yurts are quite cheap. My first one was a £3,000 yurt from Mongolia. One of my best friends, because I didn't have 2 pennies to rub together at the time, one of my best friends lent me £3,000 for this business, and I used it to go buy this second-hand yurt that got shipped up from Cornwall, put it up on the land, and then put it on Airbnb, and I paid him back within a year or so. And that was fine. And I grew that to 3 or 4 different yurts on one piece of land. And then I had another piece of land that I was working with that had some bell tents on I was running, so I grew the business quite a lot. But I didn't own the land, and I only owned the yurts that went on there. And really the ultimate wealth strategy is to own property. And that's what I stepped into in the future years, owning property that I manage, get cash flow from, and then have a share of the business itself, share of that property. And over time, the houses go up and up and up in value. It's much more powerful, much stronger than the glamping sites. It was a great start, great beginning. I now only purchase properties. I don't do rent to SA anymore. I only own houses. It's the strongest way that I grow my wealth.
So what years were you doing the glamping?
I did the glamping for about 3 years, roughly. Ultimately, and this is the same problem that happens with all rent to SA deals, and why what I teach is you do 3 or 4 rent to SAs, maybe not even that. And with that credibility, you leap into ownership. Get into ownership as quick as you possibly can. If you don't have the money, you can borrow the money with the credibility that you've had. That's what I did. The issue that I had with the glamping site, and this always happens, is the landowner wanted his land back. After 3 years, he said, "I'm really sorry, Phil, but next year, can you take your yurts off my land? I don't want you here anymore." And not because he didn't like me, but because he'd seen the success that I'd had. And he realized, well, I could just do it to myself. Phil's proven everything about this business. I've proven the demands here. I can see the nightly rates that he's charging. Why am I getting this guy on my land when I could just do it myself? So ultimately the contract ended. And that is always the danger with rent to SA businesses. You're kind of building your house on sand to a certain point. At any point, any landowner or any property owner can say, "Well, I want my house back, please." And you have to give it back. You don't have any control over that. So buying and owning the asset yourself gives you all of that control. If it runs and it's successful, if I'd owned that land where my yurts are, I'd probably still be running it now, making great money. And this is the kind of mental shift that I made when I leapt into owning houses, is okay, I've got to own these assets so this doesn't happen again. If I choose to sell a house, it's my choice, but I could keep these houses for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. It depends on what my cash flow is looking like, what these properties perform like, but I have the choice, whereas that choice is taken away from you if you do rent to SA for too long. So do rent to SA, get credibility, build up experience, build up your knowledge, and then always seek to leap into ownership as quick as you possibly can, ideally within a year or 2.
So just stepping back a bit, how did you realize that property could change your life? Was it a book you read or something you heard on a pod? What got you into property, or who? And were you part of a community or a network of other investors when you were doing this?
It was one of the guys at work, actually, when I was working on wind farms. I remember it. I was driving back to the airport from a job in Norway. Can't remember exactly where in Norway it was. But we were driving back to the airport and my work colleague was driving the van and he said, oh, would you mind if I listen to this audiobook that I've been listening to? I'm really into it. I've got an hour's drive. I just want to keep listening to this. I was like, yeah, fine, whatever. So I was like looking out the window at the Norwegian scenery going by, which is spectacular. And it was Simon Zucchi's Property Magic audiobook that this guy was listening to. Never heard of this guy, Simon Zucchi, didn't know who he was, but he was just talking about creative finance deals and how you don't need money to buy houses. And I was like, this is actually quite interesting. I believed at the time I needed to have a load of money to go and buy houses and get into property. And I was doing the classic thing of working really hard year after year, building up a big pot of savings, going and trying to buy one house on my own and then building it up again and then go buy another house by your own. And that would take decades to get to. People spend their entire lives to build a portfolio of the size I have. It's a lot of work. And this guy was talking about all these interesting different ways, and rent to SA was one of those strategies. And I just thought, okay, maybe I'll look into this some more. So that kind of interest went into signing up for one of his basic courses, going to one of his events, and ultimately doing a massive PIN kind of mastermind type program with Simon, which was really useful, really, really good experience. But I learned more from actually getting in the houses myself. I learned more by doing. This is the way my personality works. Someone can sit and teach me everything in an audiobook, but practically I learn much, much quicker. So the glamping site taught me everything I needed to know about how to run an SA business, and it gave me all the credibility I needed to jump into the next thing, which is ultimately buying houses.
Which we'll talk about now. So even though you had a very successful glamping business, I can't imagine it was generating enough cash to be able to start putting deposits down on properties. So you talk about a lot of joint ventures. Tell me how you found that, how you got into buying assets. Let's get down to that.
Okay, so the opportunity came for me during COVID. COVID was the biggest change. Before COVID, no one was lending me money to do houses. No one was renting properties to me, especially holiday lets. Now, by this point, I'd focused on holiday lets. I really was enjoying being in the countryside. The sort of people that were coming out were great to work with, great guests. They didn't damage the house. They were really looking after things very well. And I was enjoying that process. So I was very, very keen to try and find a house that I could rent or buy. So I was renting yurts, or renting a piece of land and putting yurts on them. But now I was really seeking this first property where I could do that on a bricks and mortar type basis. And then COVID happened. And actually, there was a lot of holiday homes that suddenly were empty. So whereas before I was knocking on doors with owners and agents saying, I'd love to rent this house, let me help you out. They were saying no, because they were full. They're making money without me. Whereas all of a sudden, there was this period of time where these houses were empty. The owners had no other income coming in. And I was knocking on doors and making phone calls saying, well, hey, look, I'd still do this. I know it's COVID, but if you've not got any revenue, why don't you just sign a contract with me and I'll give you guaranteed rent? Okay, you could argue that was a foolish mistake to make. However, it worked out very, very well. And I remember this next deal that I did, the first one that I ended up buying, was my first rent-to-rent on bricks and mortar. And it was a house that was 10 minutes down the road. I'd approached the agent and the landlord already and been told no. And then I drove past it during COVID and noticed it was for sale and for rent, which is a really good opportunity for a motivated vendor. They were happy to rent it to me or to sell it to me. And I phoned up the agent and said, look, I'd love to buy this, but I currently don't have the funding. Why don't you give me a year's rental on it and then I'll buy it after that? Give me first refusal. They approached the owner and he said yes. Again, this was during COVID. So it cost me £5,000 to put a deposit down for that house and pay the first month's rent up front. And I couldn't put any guests in it. I couldn't get any guests in it for 3 months. And I remember every month paying this money out going, geez, I hope this works out. Another £2,000 on the rent. Hope this works out. And I never forget it. 4th of July, when they released the COVID restrictions and the government said, you can go anywhere, but it has to be in the UK. And the place booked out overnight for the whole summer. We had a week's long block booking. And I made all my money back in the first couple of months and more. And it worked very, very, very well. So that risk I took was a massive risk, but actually really paid off. And I did, something which I really kind of lean on today is to observe the masses and do the opposite. If you're looking at everyone running away, I was running towards this opportunity. Everyone was seeing COVID as a massive problem, but I had belief that this would blow over. It's very easy to say that now, but at the time, everyone was scared of COVID and how long is this going to last for? How long is it going to go on for? Well, I just thought this is going to blow over at some point and then I'm going to be quits in here. And it worked out. And using that amazing summer's booking, I approached the agent and said, okay, well, I like this. The numbers are great. I'd like to buy it. Let's agree a price. And we fixed the price from when I made that first offer of rental. Because the figures were so good, because I had such high rental figures for that first summer, and we've not seen summers like it since, I actually found it relatively easy to find a JV partner. I said, I've got this great house in the Peak District. I'm looking for someone to come and fund it with me. I've got a little bit of money to put into the deposit, but I'm really looking for someone to help me with the deposit. But I can run it, I can manage it, I can deal with the guests, I can deal with the bookings, and we're making great money this summer. Who wants to come and help me out? And had lots of people interested. And eventually this lovely woman came and bought that house with me, and we owned it together. A fantastic deal, a fantastic first deal. So essentially it was a 1-year PLO, rent it for a year, then buy it, which I did manage to do successfully. And that was my first ever purchase, my first ever JV property. And I borrowed something like £80,000 from this person to buy that first house, using the credibility of the yurts and using the credibility of all the bookings I had for that same property for that summer. And then I just repeated that process, again, leaning into the COVID. After that summer, you might remember the calendars shut down again. The government said, okay, no more travel. Again, we went through this second phase. And then I used that credibility to go buy 10 more. I was like, okay, this works. Okay, COVID happens and then it goes away. COVID happens and it goes away. So I was buying properties all over the country in the same way. Look, this works. It's proven. I've got one property. This person's bought one with me as a JV partnership. The numbers are great. I found another one. I found another one. I found another one. And we just kept going. And because the opportunity was there, we just kept buying houses during this period. And sure enough, by the time the conveyancing had gone through, COVID had completely gone by then. And then we were sitting pretty with houses that we'd got for much cheaper than you could have bought them after COVID. And the revenue was much, much stronger for those first few years, particularly after COVID. So the returns were very good.
And were your JV partners already in your network, or were they introduced to you by other people? I'm sure listeners would love to know where you were finding JV partners.
Good question. Yeah, good question. Mostly I found these people through social networks. Okay. Now this isn't something that I advocate today because that hasn't gone 100% great in all circumstances. But of all the JV partners I've got, I've only had one deal where the JV partner's fallen apart for one reason or another. Generally nowadays, I would say it's really good to try and get to know your JV partners in a very much deeper level, multiple touch points. Maybe you meet them on social media first and that's how they find you. But then you do a Zoom and then you do a coffee and then you do another coffee, and over a period of months, you get to know each other really well. Okay, is this someone that I want to be aligned with for 10 years, 15 years? A JV partnership is very much like a marriage. You genuinely wouldn't go and marry someone at first sight without meeting them. You generally would want to get to know them better, and you date them for a little while and you go, okay, I like this person. Yeah, let's get married. And that's kind of the analogy I like to use for JV partnerships. I did meet all of them on social media, and I did not go to that due diligence process as just described. But in most cases, it worked out fine. Actually, I've got away with it, but I wouldn't advocate doing it now that we've got less deals going on. It was certainly a case of a chicken and egg. I've got this great deal. I need the money. Right. Who's going to give me the money? Oh, you will. Fantastic. Right. Let's get married and buy a house together. Just doing that multiple times. The more times you do it, the more risk is it involved. And eventually you find someone that initially is great, but then doesn't work out to be so good in the future.
I think you're absolutely right. It is a chicken and egg because you've got to work so hard. Again, the consistency, like when you were looking for that first rent-to-rent deal, the consistency to find an investor or a JV partner without having done your first deal. You've really got to be putting in lots of work and building up your online credibility, networking events, all that sort of stuff, so that people know you, trust you, and like you before you've even got that first deal. But quite often the first deal does come, doesn't it, before the money comes?
It often does. And then you get this kind of desperation to find the money, and I'm certainly in that point. I'll be honest. I was desperate in some cases. I've got this great deal. I need 100 grand. Who's got 100 grand? And people put their hands up and you go, great, let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
So yeah, you just got to be wary of that. I always teach people to try and look for deals and look for investors at the same time. A lot of people will try and waits until they've got their first deal before they then try and even start looking for investors. And that's the wrong way to do it. You really want to try and speak to investors all the time. Even if you've not got a deal, not got credibility, share your journey on social media. Again, this is a very common trait. People think, well, I've not got a deal yet. What have I got to share? We can still share that you're doing property, share that you're looking at houses in this area, share that you're trying to create a property for this purpose in this area. And people will be watching that, and they might not reach out to you initially, but you'd be surprised how many people come out of the woodwork when you do finally raise your hand and say, oh, I've got a great deal. Anyone looking to invest, speak to me. Try and do them side by side if you possibly can. And that makes it a much, much easier process. We now have a whole pipeline of investors that want to work with us, and we don't have enough deals to meet them, which is fine. fine. It's a better position to be in, to have more deals than investors. And when we ever find a deal, it's a case of, well, look, we've got this great deal. Which one of you guys wants to do this next one? And we're spoilt for choice. I mean, that's a better position to be in.
So let's talk a little bit about systems and processes, because I've got an Airbnb cottage, and you think, well, you get your first one, you think, I'll set it up on Airbnb and booking.com, I'll do it all myself and it's fine. But then suddenly you did dozen or more
Yes.
deals in that first year, and before you know it, you can't keep up with the admin. How quickly did you realize, was it from the yurts, or was it only when you went sort of onto bricks and mortar, do you think, I really need to systemize this?
The yurts taught me a lot, and that's one of the biggest lessons I got from the yurts. They did bring me cash flow, but it wasn't a life-changing amount of income. What was far more valuable for me was the experience in how to systemize and run a business like that. I was still working on the wind turbines. I was in Norway, Sweden, Germany, all over the world. And I had this little business running in the Peak District in the field. Okay, so I was forced very early on to systemize it. So it's about putting those processes in with cleaners, about systemizing the bookings and the guest communication. One of the things that really helped very quickly was a property management system, a PMS system for holiday lets. And it's a piece of software that really links all the online channels together, Airbnb and Booking.com being the main two, but lots of other channels can sync into this. All the messages come into one place, having to go on Airbnb and having to go on Booking.com to speak to guests. It all comes into one platform. They usually have apps, so you can jump on the app and answer them very, very quickly. Even whilst I was hanging off a wind turbine blade, someone trying to check into my yurt and get a little ding, like, oh, okay, yeah, here's the code to get in, or here's how you fix this problem, and they could put the phone away and go back to work. When you get a good system like that in place, it makes it much, much easier to manage. Adding new units to it is quite easy. And if you've got same units in the same place, all my yurts were on one campsite. If I added a new yurt to that campsite, it was the same cleaning team, same system, same contact information, same check-in information, apart from the lockbox codes. So it made it very easy to grow and scale like that. And then when I moved into bricks and mortar, I just transitioned that whole system over to that business and grew it very well. I have properties all over the UK, Lake District, Wales. I've got a property that I'm going through in Lincolnshire. I've got various teams throughout the country, and they all sync into this one app that I have overall control of and can direct them all, really. It works very, very well. It works very well. But I learned all of that by running my first unit remotely from Norway.
So talk to me about housekeepers, because I think that's one of the biggest struggles people have getting into this industry, is the reliability and the quality of the cleans. What have you learned about putting systems in with regards to housekeepers?
Yeah, so the cleaners are the eyes and the ears of the business more than anything else. They will go to that property, wherever that house is, far more than you ever will. So we rely a huge amount on our cleaning team, and then a good maintenance team to follow up on anything they might find. It's about having a really clear expectation of what the cleaners are supposed to be delivering. I go through training with all of our cleaning teams throughout the UK. And then it's about keeping on top of exactly what they're doing. So keeping them accountable is really, really important. We have a system where there's lots of different systems for cleaners, but the one that works best for me is we have a photo checklist that we have. Give them each of them a list for every house. I want a photo of this, 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 and this for every clean. And we just have a simple WhatsApp group per property, and the cleaners upload them on there. So every single time it's done, I can go on WhatsApp. Here we go. House has been done today, and you can see all the bedrooms. Everything's done exactly as I like it. So I can know that it's ready for the next guest to check in. That's a very simple, easy system to replicate time and time again. If you get 50, 100 houses, maybe you want to change it, but for me, it works. It works fine. I really enjoy it. And it's a very simple system for my cleaners to use. I think in some businesses, in some cases, you can go over the top with things like this and have too many things that the cleaners are supposed to keep an eye on. Whereas a simple checklist of 10, 20 photos is quite quick to do. Or a WhatsApp video, we can just go around the whole house in one go, takes them 1 or 2 minutes, and you can see everything's been done to your standards to tick all those boxes. That's all you need to do. That's all you need to do. Now, finding the right team that are willing to do that is a challenge, because throughout the UK, you've got good cleaning teams, you've got bad cleaning teams, you've also got expensive cleaning teams that are bad. Those are the worst ones, where you've paid a lot of money and they're not very good. So it's about, you've got to try and find a cleaning team that is really good, tends to be a bit cheaper, and really motivated to do a good job for you. The solution to that, I found, is small new companies that have 5 houses on the books and are looking to grow. You can capture a company in that early growth phase, and you can bring them 1 or 2 properties. They're really highly motivated to do a good job for you because you're one of their few clients, particularly if they're already doing Airbnbs and they're keen to grow in that sector, because that keeps them very busy, as opposed to people doing house cleans who might only go go in for an hour or two once a week, whereas an Airbnb takes a lot of cleaning. They really, really get behind it. The other thing I like to do is share my great reviews with my cleaners. So every time I get a 5-star review, which is a lot nowadays, I send that review to the cleaning team. I drop it in the same WhatsApp group. So they're sending all the cleans. Look, everything's done. And then, 3 or 4 days later, I'm sending a 5-star review. Another 5-star review. Well done. You're doing great. Keep up the good work. That really helps to motivate your cleaners. I'm very much a carrot kind of leader rather than a stick. I think a lot of people are very quick to admonish their cleaners for not doing this and not doing that and constantly berating them for little minor things, whereas I tend to take a bigger picture. Look, it's 5-star review, keep going, you're doing great. And then when I do have a little bit of feedback that's slightly constructive, let's say, they're usually more open to it, because they're getting good things from me all the time, not just negative. That really helps. And I've built those teams and systems throughout the UK. I could do it no problem anywhere now. I do it all the time.
And what about the long-term exit? So you've got JV partners on this. Do you plan to refurb the properties one day and refinance them, buy out the JV partners? How are you structuring that?
Most of the properties that I buy, especially nowadays, are not turnkey. That's deliberate.
Okay.
The best thing to do in property is to add value. So if you can buy a house cheaper than it's worth now on the current market and then add value, then you're forcing the equity up in the property from day one. And that's really useful. You can use that equity for all sorts of different reasons. You can use it to repay your investment partners, of course, that's one option. You could use it to roll that money into the next deal with your investor partners, or you can split the income between you. But by creating value in the houses, it gives you these multiple different exits. And of course, one exit that you could do is you could just sell the house. You could treat it like a flip. That's not what we look to do. We look to try and keep them and hold them and buy them for long term. But if we just hold on to that equity, at any point we sell, we all make money. It's a great position to be in. So that's what we look for. I tend to look for those rather than turnkey properties for that reason. It gives you these extra exits. It works very, very well. The long-term plan is to hold the houses for as long as we possibly can. We currently don't have any end date for when we're going to sell any of our houses, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. We have a review every 5 years with the investor partners. Okay. Are you happy with how things are going? Are we all happy to keep holding on to this property? What are the figures looking like? What's the profit looking like? What's the equity in this building? Do we sell this one? Do we keep this one? These are kind of long-term strategy plans, but the overall plan is to hold them for at least 10 years, if not 20. And I probably won't hold them for the rest of my life. If I sell them in 20 years, then they've probably doubled or quadrupled in value by then. I'll be sitting very, very happy. My JV partners will be the same. And then we could decide which we keep for the long term, if any at all. But it's a 10 to 20 year strategy is what I'm looking at.
Okay. And over the next 5 to 10 years, then you're going to continue with the same process, 1 or 2 properties a year?
Yeah, currently I'm buying 1 or 2 properties a year. There will be a point where I'm not going to buy anymore. I don't know when that will be, but I keep seeing great deals coming up, great houses that I love. I'm very, very passionate about it. We find houses that are all over the country that are just beautiful houses. There's a real joy in doing this for me. This is why it takes a lot of work to do it, but I'm very, very passionate about it. Grade 2, fantastic listed buildings throughout the country that are just falling apart because people can't afford to do them up, and they become very tired, very unloved, and then we can just snap them up for much cheaper than their actual market price because we've got expertise in doing these properties up. And I know that this house will make £150,000 a year, and the route that house gets regenerated is by turning it into a holiday home. A lot of the councils get behind this, a lot of the local residents get behind this, and of course once it's finished, people love to come and stay. And listed buildings are one of my favorite things to do because they've got great, amazing features. They're listed for a reason, and those same listed features are what make those houses really characterful and enjoyable for guests to stay in. So yeah, I'll still continue doing it. I don't know how many years I'll carry on, but I like it. I've very much slowed down in terms of how many I do deliberately, 1 or 2 a year. It's very manageable for me, very doable for me. I've got no shortage of people that want to work with us and want to invest in properties like that. And I very much enjoy managing and running them and giving great guest experience. So I'll carry on doing it for now, up until a point, and then maybe I'll pause for a while and see if there's something else I might want to do.
Excellent. Sounds like you've got a good plan and a bright future ahead.
Thank you, Danielle. Yeah, it's great. I love it.
Good. Well, let's go into a quick fire round. You ready?
Yes.
Yurts or houses, which has taught you more?
The yurts have definitely taught me more. Yeah, like I said, the yurts taught me everything about how to systemize and run a business. By the time I moved into houses, I already knew that, which was a great benefit.
Brilliant. One word to describe your first deal?
Unique. Yes, very unique.
Your favourite book?
I like a book by David Goggins called Can't Hurt Me. It's a fantastic book about a man that took himself from a very bad part in his life, very unfit, unhealthy, ultimately to run, 150, 200-mile ultra marathons. He became a Navy SEAL. I found that really inspiring. It's a self-help book. I love these self-help books, but that one, particularly with its physical aspect, really appealed to me. It led me to enter ultra marathons. I did 50, 70, and then 100 miles in
Wow.
2023. Very inspiring. So be careful if you're into fitness, maybe don't read it, but it really worked for me and it's inspired me to keep doing ultra runs every year.
Excellent. The biggest risk you've ever taken?
It was definitely taking that house in COVID. It paid off, but putting $5,000 down for a house that I couldn't rent to anyone else was a massive risk. That's one of the biggest risks I've ever taken.
Remote management in those early days, was it a blessing or a curse?
Definitely a blessing. If I was living around the corner from the yurts, I'd have managed them myself, and it wouldn't have taught me anywhere near as much as it did by having to force me to manage it from a different country. I learned everything I needed to do.
Cash flow or credibility, which matters more?
Well, that very much depends on where you are on your journey. Initially, you definitely need more cash flow. If you're trying to get out of your day job, you have to have some cash flow. But then for me, even though I had a bit of cash flow from the yurts, it was the credibility that was way more valuable. So I actually think credibility is more important than cash flow to enable you to unlock future finance with JV partners and lending money from people.
Excellent. The worst advice I had?
That's a good question. The worst advice I had was to leave my job early. That's one of the mistakes I made. Is I was working on the turbines, everything was good. I got advice said just go all in on property, which I did. But there was a while when I lost that income that I was making from the wind turbines before I built that up again, and that left me in a bit of a tricky spot for a while. So I had my income replaced. So even if you think you're going to achieve great things, until that's been proven, until you've replaced your income, try and keep your job as long as you possibly can. Gives you that security.
Your best lesson from during COVID?
Ooh, best lesson during COVID. The thing I learned most during COVID is that there is a demand for UK holidays. There's a huge demand for it. And that's something I didn't really believe myself until I saw it. And we've obviously all benefited from that after COVID because people have continued to stay and book in the UK.
Excellent. Finish this sentence, please. My first deal worked because...
It was so unique because nobody else was doing it.
Great. And 3 habits I try to maintain?
I try and maintain fitness. I try and run nearly every day, if not every day. Try and keep on top of your accounting and your bookkeeping. That's one mistake I made early on. So I do my accounts myself pretty much. I've got an accountant as well, but I like to get a really good fix on the numbers. And don't leave sight of why you're doing things. Keep an eye on your main motivation. If your motivation is to create lifestyle, time and freedom, then stick on that path, write down your goals and really try and stick to them.
Excellent. Phil, that's been really interesting. If people want to get in touch with you and hear more about your coaching programs, how can they do that?
Yes, so I run the Airbnb Masterclass, so you can find us on Google, Airbnb Masterclass, or you can email us at info@airbnbmasterclass.co.uk.
Excellent. Phil, it's been an absolute pleasure coming on the podcast today. Thank you so much.
No worries, it's been a real joy. Thank you, Danielle. Hope to see you again in the future.
Absolutely. This is an exclusive for you, actually, because we're going to be taking a short break from the podcast now for about 10 or 12 weeks. We've had a fantastic run of 12 episodes now, and I've had some fantastic feedback from all of our lovely listeners. And of course, if you have been listening and you think you would like to come on the podcast, then do get in touch because I shall continue to record over the next few weeks, and we will be back again in late May or early June. Wonderful. Thank you again, Phil, and we will see you all again on the next episode of First Deal Diaries.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to First Deal Diaries. This episode is brought to you by Salty Air Design, where story meets design and brands breathe deep. See you next time for another First Deal story.